Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know those assistant nurse manager interviews? They have a reputation for being tough, and we want to help you really nail them. So today we're looking at excerpts from 23 common assistant nurse manager interview questions and answers. It's by Interview Ace. The goal: to give you the edge to not just answer questions, but to really impress with your insights and stand out from the other candidates. You know, some of these questions are real curveballs. Like, how would you handle a nurse who's consistently underperforming? Or what about if a nurse questions the doctor's order? Yikes. Those scenarios seem like they're meant to make you sweat a little right now.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. Those interviews can be pretty intense, but preparation is key. It really is all about showing you can think on your feet and demonstrate those leadership skills that make you the ideal candidate.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's unpack that first scenario mentioned, the underperforming nurse. The article suggests starting with a performance evaluation. You give clear and constructive feedback, and then maybe even creating a performance improvement plan if needed. That seems like pretty standard procedure, doesn't it?
It is, it's a solid foundation for sure. But I'd say it's crucial to go beyond that textbook approach. Documentation is absolutely essential in these situations. Think about it. Every conversation,
Yeah.
every observation, every single step in the whole process needs to be meticulously recorded. This protects you, of course, but it also provides a really clear roadmap for the nurse's development as well.
That's a fantastic point about documentation. I hadn't really thought about it from that angle before. The article also emphasizes that human element here. They suggest actually sitting down with the nurse one-on-one, trying to understand if there are any personal issues going on, or maybe even some training gaps that could be contributing to the problem. Have you found that to be an effective approach in your experience?
Absolutely, 100%. It's so easy to just jump to conclusions and assume that underperformance is simply a lack of effort or skill. But so often there's something more going on beneath the surface. Maybe there's a family crisis they're dealing with, or a lack of support at home, or even just a simple misunderstanding of what's expected of them. By taking the time to actually listen and understand, you can address the root cause of the problem. And that creates a more supportive and productive work environment for everyone.
Right, it's about being a leader who empowers their team, not just dictating from above. Okay, so the article also dives into conflict resolution. And they present two really tough scenarios. First, disagreements between nurses themselves, which I imagine happens all the time. And second, nurses clashing with other healthcare professionals, like doctors. Those just seem like potential minefields to me. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of those types of conflicts?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those scenarios are way more common than you might think. And they can be incredibly challenging to navigate, that's for sure. But I think the key thing to remember is this: everyone's ultimate goal should be the patient's well being. It's about staying neutral, actively listening to all sides involved, and then facilitating a respectful and productive dialogue.
You make it sound so easy. But I can definitely see how those situations could escalate really quickly. The article actually uses this example of a nurse questioning a doctor's order, which just seems like a recipe for tension, doesn't it? How would you recommend approaching a situation like that?
Well, it's a delicate balance. You have to advocate for patient safety, obviously, while also maintaining a professional and respectful relationship with the physician. So clear communication is absolutely paramount. Explain your concerns calmly and respectfully, focusing on the evidence and the potential risks to the patient.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being assertive and diplomatic.
Exactly. You want to show you're confident in your clinical judgment, but also that you're open to collaboration and finding a solution that benefits everyone, especially the patient.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to another super challenging topic: staff shortages. The article paints a pretty bleak picture of how these shortages can really impact patient care standards. Have you seen that firsthand?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Staff shortages are a huge challenge in healthcare right now. They really can have a ripple effect throughout the entire system. It puts so much strain on the existing staff, and that often leads to burnout, sadly, and compromised patient care. It's a real test of leadership trying to keep morale up and deliver quality care when resources are so thin.
So what strategies have you found most effective in dealing with these staff shortages? The article suggests a few things, like cross-training staff to make them more flexible, optimizing schedules to reduce those overtime costs, and even using technology to improve communication and streamline those workflows. Have you tried any of those?
Oh, yeah, all of those are excellent suggestions for sure. And I'd add that being transparent with patients and their families is crucial during those times. It's about acknowledging the challenges openly, reassuring them that you're doing absolutely everything you can, and keeping them informed throughout the process. Open communication builds trust, even in the most difficult situations.
That's a really good point. It's about managing expectations and being honest about the limitations you might be facing. Okay, now let's shift gears to a topic that might be a little less familiar to some listeners: root cause analysis, or RCA, after a medical error. It sounds pretty intense. What exactly does that involve?
It is an intense process, no doubt about it, but it's also incredibly important. RCA isn't about placing blame or finding a scapegoat. It's about taking a very systematic approach to understand why an error happened so you can prevent it from happening again in the future. It's really a crucial skill for any aspiring assistant nurse manager, I'd say, because it demonstrates your commitment to patient safety and continuous improvement.
Okay, so I haven't personally been involved in an RCA process before, but the article breaks it down in a way that makes it seem a little less intimidating. They say it's about looking at the data, interviewing staff, analyzing those workflows, and really digging deep to find the underlying systemic issues that might have contributed to the error. It sounds like a super thorough investigation.
It is. It really is thorough. It often involves a whole multidisciplinary team, which is really important because you want to get as many different perspectives and insights as possible. The article mentions a tool called the 5 Whys, which can be surprisingly helpful in getting to the root of the problem.
I've heard of that. It sounds so simple, but powerful. So once you've identified those root causes through this process, what happens next?
Well, that's where the real work begins. You need to develop and implement solutions to address those underlying issues. And it's not a one-and-done situation. You have to monitor things closely, make adjustments as needed, and just continually strive to improve your systems and processes. It's a never-ending cycle of learning and improvement, showing that you understand this RCA process and can lead it effectively. That's going to really impress your interviewers.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how RCA can actually be a really valuable learning opportunity, not just a finger-pointing exercise like I initially thought.
Sure.
Let's move on to something a little more positive now: professional development and continuing education. The article really emphasizes nurturing that growth within your nursing team. Why is that so important?
Well, it's not just about keeping up with certifications or meeting mandatory training requirements. It's about creating a whole culture of lifelong learning. You want to empower your nurses to expand their knowledge, develop new skills, and stay at the forefront of their profession. It's not only beneficial for the nurses themselves, it also leads to higher job satisfaction and better retention rates. And that ultimately benefits the entire organization.
That makes sense. I haven't personally had the opportunity to lead any formal professional development initiatives yet, but the article suggests a whole bunch of different strategies, from training sessions and conferences to online courses and even mentorship programs. I thought the mentorship idea was especially interesting. Have you had any experience with those?
Mentorship programs are fantastic. I love them. They provide a structured way for experienced nurses to share their knowledge and expertise with newer nurses. It really helps to build a sense of community, provides support and guidance, and accelerates professional growth overall. I've both been a mentor and had mentors throughout my career, and I can't stress enough how valuable those relationships are. It's about passing on the torch, ensuring the next generation of nurses is equipped to handle the challenges ahead.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It shows you're investing in your team's individual growth and development, not just their ability to perform tasks. Speaking of investment, let's talk about a topic that's unfortunately becoming increasingly relevant: burnout prevention. Have you seen an increase in burnout among nurses, and what are the contributing factors?
It is heartbreaking, but yes, burnout rates are definitely on the rise among nurses. And it's not surprising when you consider the immense pressure they face every single day. Long hours, high patient loads, emotional stress, and often a real lack of support and resources. It's just a recipe for exhaustion and disillusionment, unfortunately. I think it's time to shift the conversation from simply treating burnout to actively preventing it altogether. We have to create work environments where nurses feel truly valued, respected, and supported.
I completely agree. The article has a pretty comprehensive approach to burnout prevention: regular check-ins with staff, anonymous surveys to see how stressed they are, workload monitoring, wellness programs, and even flexible scheduling. But it seems like it goes deeper than just implementing programs, right? It's about creating a culture where people actually feel comfortable speaking up if they're struggling.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. It's about fostering what's called psychological safety, where people know they can be vulnerable without fear of judgment or repercussions. And it starts with leadership setting that tone, actively listening to concerns and demonstrating empathy and compassion. We need to move away from that old suck it up and push through it mentality. It's really permeated healthcare for far too long.
That's a really powerful point. It's about recognizing that nurses are human beings too, with their own needs and limitations. And when they feel supported, they're much better able to care for their patients, right? Okay, now let's talk about a scenario that can really make your heart race as a nurse leader. That moment when you need to make a split-second decision in a critical incident, and you might not have time to consult with your superiors. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
Unfortunately, yes. Those situations definitely do come up, and they can be incredibly stressful. But in those moments, your training, experience, and instincts really kick in. The article gives this example. Imagine a post-op patient showing signs of internal bleeding, and you can't reach the attending physician. What would you do in that situation? What steps would you take to ensure the patient's safety? While also following the proper protocols, of course.
That is terrifying. I think the first thing I'd do is try to stabilize the patient as quickly as possible, while at the same time trying to get hold of another physician for guidance. The article also emphasizes how important accurate and timely documentation is in those critical moments. It's not just about covering yourself legally, but also about ensuring continuity of care, providing a clear record of exactly what happened and why, and ultimately contributing to patient safety overall.
You're absolutely right. Documentation is crucial in any healthcare setting, but especially in those high-pressure situations. Clear, concise, and accurate documentation can make all the difference in patient outcomes, and even in legal proceedings, if it comes to that. The article suggests having very clear protocols in place for documentation, conducting regular checks to make sure it's being done correctly, and leveraging technology to minimize errors as much as possible. But I think the human element is crucial here too. You need to train your staff to really understand why meticulous documentation is so important. It's not just a bureaucratic hurdle to jump through, it's a vital part of providing quality care and ensuring patient safety.
Okay, I see what you mean. So what are your thoughts on incorporating technology into those documentation processes, like using electronic health records and things like that?
I think technology can be incredibly helpful in streamlining documentation and reducing errors for sure. Electronic health records, or EHRs as they're called, can save a ton of time. They can improve accuracy and enhance communication among the entire care team. But it's also really important to make sure that everyone is properly trained on how to use these systems effectively. We don't want technology to become a barrier to good documentation.
Right, that makes sense. Speaking of things that can feel like a hurdle, let's talk about Joint Commission inspections. I know those can be incredibly nerve-wracking for everyone involved. Have you been through many of those inspections?
Oh, yes, many times. And while they can definitely be stressful, they also serve a really vital purpose. Joint Commission inspections are designed to ensure that healthcare facilities are meeting the highest standards of care and patient safety, of course. It's about holding us accountable and pushing us to constantly improve. Thorough preparation is really the key to a successful inspection, I've found. It shows you have those organizational skills and that attention to detail that's so important in this role.
So it's kind of like a test, but also a chance to shine.
Exactly. It's an opportunity to showcase your team's dedication to excellence and prove that you're running a tight ship, so to speak.
All right, so let's dive into that preparation process. The article recommends a very methodical approach, starting with a thorough review of all your policies and procedures. You want to make sure everything is aligned with those Joint Commission standards,
Yeah.
right? And then it talks about mock inspections, which I'm kind of curious about. Have you found that those mock inspections are helpful in getting everyone ready for the real deal?
Mock inspections are incredibly valuable, I'd say. They allow you to spot any potential gaps or weaknesses before those real inspectors arrive. Think of it like a dress rehearsal. It gives your team a chance to practice their responses and just familiarize themselves with the whole inspection process. Plus, it really helps to create a culture of readiness, where everyone feels confident and prepared instead of stressed and scared.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about creating a learning experience rather than a high-stakes exam. So, okay, let's say you've aced the Joint Commission inspection. Your team is well trained, and everyone is on board with providing top-notch care. But then you hit a snag budget constraints. How do you manage those financial pressures while still maintaining that really high level of quality care?
That's a challenge that so many nurse leaders face, unfortunately. It really does require a very delicate balancing act.
For sure. So what are some strategies that you've used in the past to balance the budget without compromising care?
Well, there are a few things that can help, like optimizing staff schedules to reduce those overtime costs. That's a big one. Negotiating with suppliers to try and get better deals on equipment and supplies, and implementing some cost-saving measures that don't actually compromise patient care.
Those sound like really practical solutions, but I imagine it also takes a lot of creativity and resourcefulness to make it all work, right?
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the box and finding those ways to do more with less. Sometimes it involves collaborating with other departments to share resources, or even finding innovative ways to repurpose existing equipment. It's really amazing what you can accomplish when you challenge assumptions and encourage your team to come up with those creative solutions.
That's a great point about empowering your team. They're the ones on the front lines, after all. They often have the most valuable insights into where costs can be trimmed without sacrificing quality. But sometimes it's not just about managing resources, is it? It's about advocating for your nurses and your patients when their needs aren't being met. How do you approach those situations?
Advocacy is a core responsibility of any nurse leader. I firmly believe that. It's about being a voice for those who might not feel empowered to speak up for themselves.
I agree. But how do you actually do that effectively?
Well, the article recommends using a specific example from your own experience to illustrate your advocacy skills.
So instead of just saying, I'm a good advocate, you need to show them with a concrete story. What kind of example would you recommend sharing?
I'd choose a situation that showcases your ability to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. Maybe you advocated for a nurse who was being treated unfairly, or for a patient whose needs were being overlooked. The key is to demonstrate your commitment to fairness, compassion, and ethical decision-making.
That's a great point about showcasing those core values. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you've lived those values in real-life situations. Speaking of real-life situations, healthcare is constantly changing, isn't it? New research emerges, best practices get refined, and technology advances at an unbelievable pace. How do you stay on top of all those changes and ensure that your unit is incorporating the latest evidence and innovations?
That's where continuous improvement comes in. It's about creating a culture of learning and innovation where everyone is committed to providing the best possible care. And that means basing it on the most recent evidence.
Mhm.
You have to stay up to date on those changes and find ways to implement them in your unit.
Okay, so how do you actually foster that culture of continuous improvement? What strategies have you found to be effective?
Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is to create a true learning environment where nurses feel comfortable asking questions, sharing ideas, and even challenging the status quo. It's about fostering a sense of curiosity and a real willingness to embrace new approaches. And it starts with leadership setting the tone and demonstrating a commitment to lifelong learning themselves.
So it's about leading by example, showing your team that you're also always learning and growing,
Yeah.
right? Now, we can't talk about modern healthcare without mentioning technology, especially electronic health records or EHRs. They've revolutionized the way we document care, track patient data, and communicate with each other. But they also come with their own set of challenges, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Implementing a new EHR system can be a massive undertaking. It really can. It requires careful planning, extensive training, and ongoing support.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Have you been involved in implementing a new EHR system before?
Yes, I have. And I can tell you firsthand that it's a complex process with both benefits and challenges.
So what are some of the biggest challenges you faced?
One of the biggest challenges is getting everyone on board with the new system. Change can be difficult for people, especially when it involves technology. So it's really important to involve staff in the planning and implementation process as much as possible to make sure that their needs and concerns are being addressed.
That makes sense. So how did you approach that?
We held a series of meetings and training sessions to educate staff about the new EHR system. We answered their questions, addressed their concerns, and gave them plenty of opportunities to practice using the system. We also created a support team that was available to help staff with any technical issues or questions they had.
So it sounds like communication and support were key to a successful implementation.
Absolutely. We also made sure to celebrate successes along the way and recognize staff members who were embracing the new technology.
That's a great idea. It's about creating a positive and supportive environment, even when things are challenging.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that EHRs are just tools. They're there to support patient care, not replace human interaction.
That's a really important point. We need to make sure that nurses are still spending quality time with their patients, building relationships, and providing compassionate care. Technology should never come at the expense of the human touch.
I couldn't agree more.
Speaking of challenges that require a human touch, let's talk about public health crises. We've all seen firsthand how quickly a pandemic or other health emergency can overwhelm our healthcare systems. How do you prepare your unit and your staff for those high-stress situations?
That's a question that's on the minds of a lot of healthcare leaders these days, and for good reason. Public health crises require a different level of preparedness and response than we're used to.
For sure. So how do you prepare for the unpredictable?
Well, you have to start by developing a comprehensive crisis management plan. It should include things like infection control protocols, communication strategies, resource allocation, and surge capacity planning.
Those are all critical elements, I can see that. But I imagine it also takes a lot of flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to think on your feet when a crisis actually hits. Have you ever had to respond to a public health emergency?
Yes, unfortunately, I have. And one of the biggest lessons I learned is the importance of clear, concise communication. During a crisis, people are looking for guidance and reassurance more than ever. It's essential to keep your team informed, provide regular updates, and be transparent about the challenges you're facing.
That makes sense. Clear communication can help to reduce anxiety and build trust, even in the midst of chaos. But it's not just about communicating information, is it? It's also about providing emotional support to your staff who are under immense pressure during a crisis. What strategies have you found effective in supporting your team's well-being during those really difficult times?
You have to recognize that during a crisis, your staff is your most valuable asset. Their well-being is directly linked to their ability to provide quality care.
Right.
So you have to provide support and resources to help them cope with the stress and trauma they may experience. Things like access to mental health services, peer support groups, and flexible scheduling can make a big difference.
Those are all incredibly valuable resources. And I think it also sends a powerful message to your team that you care about their well-being and you're there to support them through those tough times. Now let's shift gears back to a more routine aspect of nursing leadership, preparing your unit for a Joint Commission inspection. We talked earlier about the importance of thorough preparation and mock inspections. But what specific steps do you take to make sure that your unit is really ready for the real deal?
Well, as we discussed, it starts with a meticulous review of policies and procedures. You want to make absolutely sure that everything is up to date, in compliance with those Joint Commission standards, and easily accessible to the inspectors. Then you conduct those mock inspections to identify any areas that need improvement and to give your team a chance to practice. But it's not just about checking boxes. It's about engaging your team and empowering them to take ownership of the process.
So it's about creating a culture of accountability where everyone understands the importance of meeting those really high standards. What are some specific ways to get your team invested in that preparation process?
One really effective strategy is to actually involve them in the mock inspections. Let them take on the role of inspectors, ask questions, and provide feedback. This not only helps them understand the process better, but it also gives them a sense of ownership and pride in their work.
That's a great way to turn a potentially stressful event into a learning opportunity. It's about empowering your team to really showcase their knowledge, their skills, and their commitment to excellence. Okay, so we've talked a lot about clinical skills, leadership qualities, the ability to handle those challenging situations, but let's not forget about teamwork. A cohesive and supportive team is absolutely essential for providing exceptional patient care, right?
Yeah.
How do you foster that sense of teamwork and collaboration within your unit?
Teamwork is the absolute heart of nursing, I'd say. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and supported. You need to foster a culture of collaboration, open communication, and mutual respect.
I completely agree. What are some specific strategies you've used to build those strong team dynamics?
Well, there are a few things that can make a big difference. Regular team building exercises can help nurses get to know each other better and develop a sense of camaraderie. It's also important to have open communication channels so that everyone feels comfortable sharing ideas, concerns, and feedback. And you need to address any interpersonal issues promptly and effectively to prevent conflicts from escalating.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to celebrate successes together and recognize individual contributions to the team's overall goals.
Absolutely. Celebrating successes together is so important. It helps to build morale, foster a sense of accomplishment, and reinforce positive behaviors. It's about recognizing that everyone plays a vital role in the team's success.
Well said. Speaking of roles and responsibilities, one of the biggest challenges for assistant nurse managers is managing their time and juggling all those different administrative duties, right? How do you stay organized, prioritize tasks, and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks?
Time management is a crucial skill for any nurse leader, that's for sure. You're constantly being pulled in different directions, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
I can imagine.
You need to use a combination of tools and strategies to stay on top of everything. Things like digital calendars, to-do lists, and delegation techniques can be incredibly helpful.
Those are all great tools. I use those myself.
Mm.
But I imagine it also takes a lot of discipline and self-awareness to make it all work. How do you determine which tasks to delegate and which ones require your personal attention?
That's a great question. It's about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and delegating tasks that can be effectively handled by others. It's also about developing trust in your team and empowering them to take ownership of their responsibilities. But of course, there are always tasks that require your expertise or your authority. It's about finding that balance between delegation and direct involvement.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about knowing when to step back and when to step in. Now, we've touched on this a little earlier, but I want to circle back to the topic of managing staff burnout. Because it's such a critical issue in healthcare, we can't talk about it enough. What are some additional strategies you found effective in preventing and addressing burnout among your nursing staff?
Burnout is a complex issue, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
For sure.
But it's really important to recognize the signs of burnout early on and take steps to address it before it becomes a major problem.
What are some of those early signs?
Well, some common signs of burnout include emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a reduced sense of personal accomplishment.
Okay, and what can nurse leaders do to address those signs?
There are a lot of things you can do. Offering flexible work schedules, encouraging breaks throughout the day, and promoting a culture of self-care can go a long way in preventing burnout.
Those are all great ideas. It's about creating a work environment where nurses feel supported and valued not just for their skills, but also for their well-being. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the emotional toll that nursing can take. Nurses are constantly exposed to suffering and loss, and they need to have healthy outlets for processing those experiences.
You're absolutely right. Emotional support is a critical component of burnout prevention. Things like access to counseling services, debriefing sessions after traumatic events, and peer support groups can provide nurses with the tools they need to cope.
Those are all valuable resources, and they really demonstrate a commitment to supporting your staff's mental and emotional health. Okay, now let's talk about a scenario that tests your ability to think on your feet and make really quick decisions. Imagine you're faced with a critical incident, but you can't reach your supervisor for guidance. What do you do?
That's a situation that every nurse leader dreads, but it's also a moment where your leadership skills are truly tested.
I bet.
In those high-pressure moments, you have to rely on your training, your experience, and your instincts.
So what are some key things to remember in those critical incidents?
First and foremost, prioritize patient safety. Always. Assess the situation quickly, gather as much information as possible, and take appropriate action to stabilize the patient. Then try to reach another physician for guidance. If that's not possible, you may need to make decisions based on your own clinical judgment and the available resources.
That sounds like a lot of pressure.
It is, but it also shows the importance of being confident in your skills and knowledge. And of course, documentation is crucial in those situations. You have to create a clear and accurate record of what happened, the decisions you made, and the actions you took.
Right, documentation is always key. Speaking of learning from experience, let's talk about a topic that's often overlooked in nursing leadership: patient satisfaction. It's not just about providing excellent clinical care. It's also about creating a positive experience for patients from the moment they walk in the door to the moment they leave. How do you approach patient satisfaction in your unit?
Patient satisfaction is becoming increasingly important in healthcare these days, and for good reason. Patients have more choices than ever before, and they're looking for healthcare providers who not only deliver high-quality care, but who also provide a positive and compassionate experience.
Absolutely.
You're exactly right. It really is about going above and beyond those clinical outcomes. It's about creating a welcoming and supportive environment, communicating clearly with patients and their families, and addressing any concerns promptly and with empathy.
Those are all essential parts of a good experience, for sure. But I imagine it also takes paying attention to the little things and a willingness to go the extra mile, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's the little things that often make the biggest difference.
What are some specific things that you do to enhance patient satisfaction in your unit?
One strategy that's really simple but effective: make sure that every single patient interaction is positive and personalized. Take a moment to introduce yourself properly, explain procedures clearly, answer all their questions, and really address any concerns they might have. It's about making patients feel seen and heard and valued as individuals.
That's a great point about personalization. It's about treating each person as an individual, not just a number on a chart. And I think it also involves empowering your staff to do the same, right?
Exactly. Encourage your team to take ownership of patient satisfaction and to go above and beyond to create those positive experiences.
So it's about creating a team effort where everyone understands that patient satisfaction is a shared responsibility, not just something for the nurses to worry about.
You got it.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
Yeah.
From handling those tricky personnel issues to navigating ethical dilemmas, managing budgets, leading through public health crises, embracing technology, advocating for your staff and your patients, and creating a culture of teamwork, excellence, and patient-centered care.
It's definitely been a whirlwind tour of all those essential skills and qualities needed to excel as an assistant nurse manager.
It's clearly a demanding role, but also incredibly rewarding, I'd imagine.
It absolutely is. It's about making a real difference in the lives of your patients, your staff, and the healthcare system as a whole.
Okay, so before we wrap up today, I want to touch on one final topic that I know is a source of anxiety for a lot of aspiring nurse leaders. Those curveball questions that interviewers love to throw in to see how you think on your feet. What are your thoughts on handling those unexpected questions?
Those curveball questions can definitely be intimidating, no doubt. But they're also an opportunity to showcase your personality, your critical thinking skills, and your ability to handle pressure.
So how do you prepare for the unexpected?
The key is to stay calm, take a moment to gather your thoughts, and answer honestly and authentically.
So it's about being yourself, showcasing your unique strengths, and demonstrating that you're not afraid of a challenge. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they prepare for those assistant nurse manager interviews?
Remember this. You've come this far for a reason. You have the knowledge, the skills, and the experience to succeed in this role. Believe in yourself, showcase your passion for nursing leadership, and let your personality shine through. You got this.
That's a great pep talk. Confidence is key, right?
It absolutely is. And don't forget to prepare thoroughly using all those resources we've discussed today. The more prepared you are, the more confident you'll feel going into those interviews.
Okay, so preparation and confidence are the keys to success. I think that's fantastic advice. Now, we've talked about a lot of concrete scenarios and skills today, but there's another layer to these interviews that can be a bit trickier. It's those unexpected or curveball questions that interviewers sometimes throw in just to see how you react. The article mentions this, suggesting it's a way to gauge your critical thinking and how you handle pressure in the moment. What are your thoughts on those types of questions?
Those curveball questions can definitely throw you off guard if you're not prepared for them. But they're not meant to be trick questions, really. It's an opportunity for the interviewers to see how you think on your feet, how you approach problems, and how you communicate your ideas under pressure. It's a chance to let your personality shine through a bit, too, which can make you more memorable.
So it's less about having the right answer
Mhm.
and more about showcasing your thought process.
Exactly. The interviewers want to see that you can think critically, that you can analyze a situation and articulate your reasoning in a clear and concise way. They're looking for someone who's adaptable, resourceful, and can handle those unexpected challenges that inevitably come up in a leadership role.
Right, because healthcare is full of surprises, isn't it?
It certainly is.
The article gives a few examples of these types of questions, like, what's your biggest weakness? Or tell me about a time you failed. Those can be tough to answer authentically without sounding too rehearsed or too cliche.
It can be tough, for sure.
So any tips for navigating those tricky waters?
Honesty is key, I always say. But it's also about framing your answers in a way that highlights your self-awareness and your commitment to growth. For example, if you're asked about a weakness, don't try to disguise a strength as a weakness. That's a common mistake. Instead, choose a genuine area where you're working to improve and talk about the specific steps you're taking to develop that skill.
So it's about turning a potential negative into a positive by showing that you're proactive and committed to continuous improvement.
Exactly. You want to show them that you're not afraid to acknowledge your weaknesses and that you're actively seeking ways to become a more effective leader.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about turning those curveball questions into opportunities to showcase your strengths, not your weaknesses.
Now you're getting it.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything in this deep dive today. We've explored those challenges, the opportunities, the skills you need to excel as an assistant nurse manager. We talked about handling difficult conversations, leading through change, managing budgets, building a high-performing team.
We've also emphasized how important continuous improvement is, embracing technology, advocating for your staff and patients, and creating a culture of teamwork, excellence, and patient-centered care.
Most importantly, we talked about that human element of leadership, the importance of empathy, compassion, and building strong relationships with your team.
Those are the things that truly make a difference in the end.
So as you head into those interviews, remember to be confident, be authentic, and showcase your passion for nursing leadership.
And good luck out there, future assistant nurse managers. We're rooting for you. You have the potential to make a real difference in the lives of your patients and your team.
And that wraps up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep into the things that matter most. So it's about making those patients feel seen, heard, and valued as individuals.
Exactly. It really is the little things that often make the biggest difference in their experience.
Well, I think that about covers it for today's deep dive. We explored the challenges and opportunities of being an assistant nurse manager, and we dove deep into those skills you'll need to excel in this role. From managing staff and budgets to navigating ethical dilemmas and handling those high-pressure situations.
And hopefully we've given our listeners a better understanding of what to expect in those interviews and some practical strategies for really showcasing their skills and experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't forget to check out that full article we mentioned, 23 Common Assistant Nurse Manager Interview Questions and Answers by Interview Ace. It's packed with even more great tips and insights to help you prepare. And as you head into those interviews, remember what we talked about today. Be confident, be authentic, showcase your passion, and most importantly, believe in yourself.
You've got this.
And that wraps up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of nursing.